Here's the Hunter TC37. A couple things to note. There's a QR on how to operate the machine, as well as directions on how to not break your TPMS sensors. We're just going to go over the controls really quick. First control's here at the bottom. The pedal on the left operates pressures, the pedal on the right operates the rotation. Up here you have this pull pin right here that's going to adjust the table for whatever height you want. This button right here, yellow button, allows you to move and operate this arm. You got this little guy right here. We got two switches. The switch on your left when you're operating it operates the bottom. And the one that's on your right when operating it operates the top. These two yellow buttons are index buttons. So when you're adjusting the machine to fit the wheel that you're going to operate, you push down this yellow button and then you pull or push this to adjust it for the wheel that you're working on. And that index button, as you're breaking the bead, you might have to push this out just a little bit. That's what that index button does. And then when you lift it back up, it automatically goes in. Your bead breaker on the side. First thing we have to do is set up the machine for the wheel and tire. I want this a little bit higher personally. We'll go right there. This is more your preference of how high you want it. There's a little pin right here. This pin needs to go in one of the lug holes. You make sure that lines up. Center of the wheel. Now, notice it bounces. I don't want that. I want to lock this in place, which requires me to push it down and turn about half turn, 90 degrees, something like that. Now it's locked in there. Take this, rotate it down, or squeeze the red knob. And I have maybe quarter to half inch gap between this and the rim. So next thing you gotta do is you gotta make sure there's no air in the tire. I just like to take my valve core tool, take that valve out. This thing was already flat. Now, when I'm demounting the beads, my TPMS sensor is right here right now. I want it right here about 1 o'clock position. So I'm gonna rotate it to that 1 o'clock position. Next thing, I'm gonna go ahead and bring both of these just barely touching the tire. I got a mirror right there for reference. And I'm going to go ahead and rotate and push both of these buttons down until those discs drop maybe about an inch, inch and a half below and above the flange. Alright, right here it started to fold the tire rather than break the bead. This is where my index comes in. So again, I'm going to rotate it. The disc drops right below the flange right here. So now I'm going to hit the index button. It's going to bring the disc out a little bit further so I can push down more on the bead of the tire rather than the sidewall. My bead's broken all the way around up top and all the way around on the bottom. You can go ahead and return these to home just like I did by lifting up on those black switches. You don't have to push this forward. Why don't you just leave it where it's at, so that if we're doing a set of 4, stuff like that, we got to bring this back down when we're installing it, whatever the case, we have that option. I'm going to bring this over. You want this arm to be at about a 90-degree angle whenever you're dealing with the taking the tire on and off. Again, you have to hold this button down the whole time to move that. If it moves without holding the button down, let me know. I got my tire lever right here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it underneath right here, lift up the tire up and over this part. That's a little hard to see from there, so I'll make sure I get another shot of that. Alright, now what makes this easier is we have to utilize the drop center of the tire, and I'll show you that in another clip here in a second. I'm going to push down on this side while lifting this up and over. Well, I can be a little lazier with this machine, or maybe if I got some run flat tires, low profile tires, I can make it easier. I can use this as my hand. So I can go ahead and use this to push the bead down in the drop center. Right about there is all it needs. And then this part lifts up and over. Now, if I was going to do this without making the video, I'd probably be standing right here. But this tire is a little bit easier, so for me to move around and things like that, I think I'll be okay. As you rotate the tire, it's going to start pulling the tire up and off the rim, just like you guys see here. If this comes in contact with the arm, just make sure you stop, lift that up, and push it out of the way. Alright. Now, there's a couple ways I could do this. I could do this similar to the Coates machine, where I use the tire lever and I pick up the bottom bead up and over this. So if you want to know how to do that, go ahead and take a look at the Coates machine. I'm going to utilize this machine a little bit differently, and I'm going to use the lower disc to pull this off for me. So I'm going to lift up the tire on this side. I rotate. My tire is now off the rim. Go ahead, lift up. Return that bottom arm to home. Now you can do whatever you need to do. Maybe you got to clean up the rim if it's leaking. Maybe you're replacing the rim. More than likely, you're just going to be replacing the tire. So when I go ahead and reinstall that, again, always refer to the piece of paper that's on the wall, a poster, where to position your valve stem, your TPMS, so that you don't break it. So when I'm mounting the bottom bead, when I'm putting the first bead on, bottom bead, I'm going to have this at about 6 o'clock. Right about there. Let's say this is my new tire. I'm going to put my new tire on. I got to lube the bead first. Always make sure you throw the top back on that. This stuff will dry out. Make sure that the tire's in the proper rotation for whatever side of the tire or car you're putting it on. Maybe this is a rotational tire, something like that. So you're going to check that. If all else fails, it's not rotational, you don't know what side it goes on, always go off the DOT number and put the manufacturing date facing outward. So in this case, facing up. Got my DOT number, manufacturer date right here, 3215. I'm going to go ahead and throw that on the wheel. Bring this arm down. And I'm going to make sure that the bead stays underneath the notch to the right and above on the left. So that's kind of easy. You just take the tire and almost let it sit at an angle. I'm just going to rest my hand here, it doesn't take a lot of force, and hold the pedal down, rotate, and the machine kind of does the rest. Again, refer to the poster on the wall, make sure the valve's at 3 o'clock. Again, I need to utilize that drop center, so I got to push the bead down into the drop center on this side. So I'm going to go ahead and take this, move it down just enough to push the tire into the drop center. All right, now it's going to hit the guide right here. It's getting really close, so I am going to hold the yellow button down and just push it out just a little bit. You want to make sure that you never hit the machine or hit the rim when articulating these arms. Make sure that they're clear of anything that they could possibly break, fingers, toes, all that stuff as well. All right, so it's pushing my bead right in where the drop center is going to be. I don't want it too low. That's going to put too much stress on the bead. And then I'm going to bring this guy over and do the same thing. Right about there is good. And I'm going to go ahead and start rotating, and I'm just going to help guide this around the wheel as well. All right. My tire's set. I got to seat the bead. All right. And I'm in the habit, even though this has the lock on it, it's always a good idea to hold on to this. Or sometimes what I do is I put it against the tire and then hold it there with my hip, just because I have seen these detach on older machines and then they whip around and a lot of times hit somebody in the face. I'm going to go ahead, hold down the air pressure pedal halfway. All right, there's bead 1 and 2. That one was pretty quiet. Put my valve core back in. And inflate this to whatever the operating pressure is supposed to be for the vehicle. So in this case, 32 psi. And I'm going to check out that gauge that's on the top to verify that. I'll hold it down a little bit, lift up off the pedal. It tells me my reading. Right now it's 5 psi.